In the summer of 1945, the most powerful weapon ever built was ready to change the world. But just weeks before it was used, there was a terrifying possibility. It might not work at all. Not because the science was wrong, not because the bomb design was flawed, but because of a single, invisible problem, hidden inside uranium itself. The Manhattan Project is often told as a story of unstoppable momentum. Billions of dollars, the world's greatest physicists, entire cities built in secret. But buried inside declassified production logs is a quiet truth. For years, the project's biggest obstacle wasn't building a bomb. It was getting enough of the right kind of uranium to make one. And at several critical points, it almost broke the entire mission. To understand the problem, we need one clear definition. Natural uranium is mostly uranium-238. The isotope needed for a bomb is uranium-235. And uranium-235 makes up less than 1% of natural uranium. Less than 1%. That meant scientists couldn't just refine uranium the way you refine oil. They had to separate atoms that were nearly identical in weight, differing by just 3 neutrons. Imagine trying to separate 2 types of sand grains that look identical, but weigh slightly differently. Now imagine doing that trillions of times. That was uranium enrichment. And in 1942, when the Manhattan Project officially began, no one on Earth had ever done it at industrial scale. 3 completely different enrichment methods were pursued at once: electromagnetic separation, gaseous diffusion, and thermal diffusion. Because no one knew which would actually work. It wasn't redundancy, it was desperation. And that desperation would soon collide with physics. The electromagnetic method relied on massive machines called calutrons. They were designed to bend uranium ions using magnetic fields, separating heavier atoms from lighter ones. It worked, but it worked painfully slowly. Each calutron required enormous amounts of copper for its magnets, so much copper, in fact, that the US government quietly borrowed thousands of tons of silver from the Treasury to substitute into the wiring. At one point, Oak Ridge was consuming more electricity than the entire city of New York. And yet output remained dangerously low. Operators, many of them young women with no formal physics training, were instructed to monitor dials and adjust controls without fully knowing what the machines were building. Even slight misalignments reduced uranium purity. Production logs from 1944 show repeated bottlenecks. Yields were inconsistent. Machines overheated. If enrichment efficiency dropped below critical thresholds, the project timeline would slip. And if the timeline slipped too far, the war in the Pacific might end before the bomb was ready. The United States wasn't racing time alone. They were racing uncertainty. Unlike the plutonium bomb tested at Trinity, the uranium bomb, Little Boy, was never tested before being used in war. It was considered simple by comparison. 2 subcritical masses would be fired together like a gun barrel, triggering a chain reaction. But here's the rarely discussed nuance. The entire calculation depended on having enough highly enriched uranium to guarantee supercriticality. If enrichment purity dropped too low, the reaction might fizzle. Not explode, fizzle, producing only a fraction of its intended yield. Scientists were confident, but not absolutely certain. The uranium supply chain from Oak Ridge had to deliver material enriched to over 80% U-235. Anything less increased risk margins. As late as mid-1945, shipment quantities were tightly calculated. There was no backup uranium bomb. Only one was being assembled. If it failed, years of effort and geopolitical leverage would evaporate instantly. The gamble wasn't just scientific, it was strategic. By early 1945, Oak Ridge was finally producing enriched uranium at scale, but barely. The gaseous diffusion plant required thousands of stages to gradually increase purity. A single leak in the barrier system could contaminate output. Engineers fought microscopic corrosion problems inside miles of piping. Even small impurities in the diffusion barrier membranes drastically reduced efficiency. In internal assessments, leaders acknowledged the enrichment program was operating at the edge of feasibility. Had the war ended 6 months earlier, or had key equipment failures cascaded, the uranium bomb might not have been ready. History often feels inevitable in hindsight, but in reality, it balanced on enrichment yield percentages, power grid stability, and microscopic membrane integrity. The Manhattan Project didn't just split the atom, it nearly lost to the physics of separation itself. So what was the Manhattan Project's biggest hidden risk? It wasn't theoretical physics, it wasn't bomb design, it was industrial scale, uranium enrichment. Key takeaways. First, natural uranium contains less than 1% E235. Separation was unprecedented at that scale. Second, multiple enrichment methods were pursued because no one knew which would succeed. Third, output inefficiencies and material bottlenecks nearly delayed the bomb's readiness. And fourth, the uranium bomb used in 1945 was never test detonated before deployment. The success of the Manhattan Project depended not just on genius, but on fragile engineering margins and statistical confidence. If you want to explore more hidden engineering bottlenecks that shape world history, the near failures behind events we think were inevitable, subscribe. Because sometimes history isn't written by the winners. It's written by the margins,